it can be really scary because you're so used to living your life the way you have for the last 10, 15, 20 years. But it's a great opportunity to discover both who you are in terms of your strengths, but also your weaknesses. Like, whoa, I've never really got to explore. I need to explore. And courage is one of them. It's so easy to fall back on our laurels and our old habits. But when you're starting your life again, fresh, like it's an opportunity for courage and risk taking and to try new things.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to the Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nicky Ballou. I'm here with a special repeat guest, my good friend, Michael Osterlenk. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hey, Nicky, thanks for having me back, man. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you.
Honestly, brother, I feel exactly the same way. You're a great guest. You always make me think. You always teach me new things, which I really appreciate. So we're going to talk today about men that are getting a second chance at life. And I asked you to come on the show to talk about this because you brought this up in one of the coaching calls I had with you and our client work together. So why don't you, just for the sake of the folks, give a very quick background of yourself for anybody who's new, who doesn't remember who you are, who hasn't heard of you, and then let's get into this whole conversation of men and their second chance at life.
That sounds great. So, almost 30 years as a marriage and family therapist, 25 years as a coach. I can tell you another time why I switched from therapy to coaching. I spent about a decade working with Commander Mark Devine at SEALFIT, running his Unbeatable Mind Academy and such programs underneath his auspices. I worked for another SEAL, Dan Cirillo, may he rest in peace, Spartan 7. And I've done a lot of work in the kind of the human optimization, resilience space in combination with my work as a marriage and family therapist. So I as you know, I run around in many different worlds.
Yeah, 100%, brother. So, Michael, why is it that men find themselves in a situation that they need a second chance at life sometimes? Just explain this whole philosophy for us.
And I actually just use my personal experience. I was divorced a few years ago. And as you separate from the wife and you got to live separately from the wife. And I actually chose, instead of like living down the street and, waiting for the year or year and a half to finish up, I hit the road. And I literally traveled around the country for about a year and a half. Also went to South America, I went to Ecuador. So I got the opportunity to just travel around and spend amazing, great time with friends. And I had, for some reason, either all my friends that he spent the time with traveling around were either coaches, therapists, or healers of one sort or another. And I found myself in some really deep, immense conversations about life and the universe and everything, pointing to me here's an opportunity for you to recreate your life. You no longer have a wife, a home, and all the things that means for you. What does your life look like? And I took those questions really seriously. And in my travels, what does that mean for me? And I had to reprogram my nervous system. I can tell you an interesting story. I had to reprogram how I thought about things. And because I was so used to being in it, in that particular marriage, in that particular lifestyle, the habits, daily habits, and I like to break out of that and to have the freedom, really 100% freedom to do whatever the fuck I wanted to do was really awesome, but also a challenge. And part of that was just reflecting my life physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Who am I in light of this new freedom that I have? And who do I want to be? And then exploring those questions, I started bringing the learnings that I had during that period of time into my work in therapy and into my work as a coach. And I started working with men who were then asked, in that same position, asking the same kind of questions.
So why do you think so many men over the last 50, 60 years are finding themselves in that position?
Yeah, so I think, I'm of two minds. I think at one level, the high rates of divorce and the breakup of the family are a problem. And you and I can talk offline, and we can even talk here about government policies and cultural forces that are destructive of the family. And I do look at them with a critical eye, and a lot of those things need to be reformed. But I also think in parallel with that, there's a growing recognition of the individual within our culture. And I don't just mean a surface level recognition of the individual, immediate needs and gratification and a libertarian attitude. But like people are beginning to, and I see this more with women, because I work with a lot of women too, but a growing number of men beginning to ask themselves like, ooh, what do I want out of life? How do I want to be in my life? How do I want to express, my purpose in this life? Like there's some deep existential as well as interpersonal questions that are now more okay to be asked. And I find more and more people asking those questions, and in many cases leading to separation and divorce, in many cases leading to people finding a new partner who more reflects the decisions they're now taking in their life, that they're more conscious, they're more intentional, and they're finding partners who reflect that kind of intent and consciousness that they're now possessing. So a lot less unconscious forces driving them, more conscious choices driving them.
It strikes me, Michael, that in the past, people would get married with somebody in large part because they needed to, right? Marriage was how, for women, they were provided for, and how the family unit got together and children got created. And this whole question of romantic love really wasn't what marriage was all about back in the day. It seems like it's a whole new thing that you marry for love. You married because it was necessary, it was important, it was how you brought things forward. Love would develop in those relationships over time, obviously because people had children together and they moved forward, but nobody got married based on romantic love. In fact, the way that they would get married is they would go and look at it in a very clear-eyed way and say, look, is this a person a good fit for me? Like a woman would be thinking, is he a good provider? Is he going to be able to work and take care of the family? And the man would think, is she going to be a good mother? Is she going to be somebody who's going to be stable and raise the children well? And I think from the point of view of society, that really worked. That had our society be in a place where, smart, strong, stable children came out of those family relationships and family dynamics. There wasn't a whole lot of drama. There wasn't a whole lot of fatherless boys committing crimes and fatherless girls getting pregnant and becoming prostitutes and things like that. And I think this whole notion of marrying for love is, I don't want to say it's completely nuts, but it's flawed. If you just marry for love, that's where you can pick somebody and they are not the right person for you. And that feeling of love that you have might not be love. It just might be high-level, high-grade lust. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I always say yes and, yes and, yes and. So I think love is a driver for relationships, and other qualities and characteristics need to be in place. And this is kind of what I was referring to earlier, like intellectually or mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I think it's really important for people to start thinking about, what do I want intellectually in terms of compatibility with a partner? What do I want emotionally? How do I want to be able to show up in this relationship with this person? How do I want them to show up with me? Spiritually, what are our values? And spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be religious values, but what are our values? What are important character traits I want to see in this other person? Love, caring, compassion, risk-taking, courage, all tons of different integrity, tons of different character traits. And I think it's important, and I tell this to people who are starting to date early on, is like, try not to take any major decisions early on in terms of the long-term decision-making, because as you just said, there's a lot of hormones flowing. It's very exciting. People put their best foot forward. What I usually tell people is like, go through some tough times with this person before deciding to make a long-term commitment, because you want to see how they handle adversity. Are they able to deal with stress? Are they able to deal with setbacks? Things along those lines. All that plus the intellectual stuff, the emotional stuff, the spiritual stuff, all really important. So I would say love, yes. All those other things, yes, too. And then, some of the more, I would say, less than modern understandings of the male-female relationship, like protector and provider. Like now these days, women, actually, I think could probably in some cases do better economically than some men. More graduates, more women go to college than men. So there's changing dynamics there. So there's less of a need necessarily for man to be the provider in terms of money. That's a different dynamic going on, mostly here in our country, in our countries, because you're not an American.
Sure.
But still the provider and the protector. Like there's other ways a person can provide and protect their, in this case, a man to a woman. So I think those things are really important too, but maybe they need to be thought of a little bit differently in light of the changing dynamics in our culture. So all that stuff I think is really important for people to take into consideration when they're determining a long-term partnership or marriage.
Well, for younger folks, one of the things I want to say to young women is they sold you a bill of goods by having you go work for a corporation rather than work in the home, because the boss there, typically a man, doesn't really care about you and is going to work his ass off and take the best of your youth. And you're going to work there in your early 20s to your mid to late 30s before you go, oh my God, my biological clock is ticking. I need some children. And you may or may not be in a position to make a smart decision as to who to have children with at that point in time. I think these young women are better off, quite frankly, not going to work, finding a good man, getting married and having their kids, and maybe working later in life if that's something they really want to do. And I wonder if university today even makes sense for most people, or colleges, as you put it, right? Because it seems that many of these colleges and universities have become training grounds for wokeism rather than preparatory places for living a great life. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, okay, quite a few things you laid out there. So I'm a very libertarian person, even in the cultural space. If a woman wants to work, she should be free to work, whatever she wants to do.
100%.
Yeah, and I know you believe the same thing too. Generally speaking, though, I would have the same critique of men going into the corporate space, actually slightly different, but similar concerns than maybe women going in the corporate space. Men want to go in the corporate space, cool. But the thought of working 12, 14 hours and spending 2 hours in traffic on the way back and
That's
not
nuts.
with your family, I see the Industrial Revolution as an unfortunate vehicle, along with other government policies, to destroy the family, really. If you look at our education system, not even college, you look at the education system, you look at John Taylor Gatto, he's written quite a few books on this, he's deceased now. But the education was created for a few different reasons. One of them was to create workers in the factories and people to be obedient to the militaries. From Prussia, they lost the war against Napoleon, and they created this whole system, which we incorporated here in the States, and it's now international now. So just looking at that, that helped destroy the family. So you want to talk about the destruction of the family, that is one key thing that led to the destruction of the family. So I do question a lot of the practices we have in the conventional sense of how we live our lives as both destructive to the family, destructive to the individual. And we can get into diet, nutrition, and all this stuff. A lot of our systems we have in place, institutions are pretty, in my perspective, pretty anti-human, anti-health, anti-well-being.
I agree.
Yeah. But in terms of college, I also agree with you too. We live in the information age. We're transitioning out of the industrial age. There's a lot less value, not 100% less value, but there's a lot less value for the majority of people necessarily to get a college education. I would rather see a market emerge where there's tons of different opportunities, trade schools. I would even reform unions. I think unions should be thinking differently how they do things, but we can have that. That's a different conversation. But I think our institutions are too slow to shift. And I think they need to shift a lot more quickly to reflect the opportunities that the information age provides us in terms of breaking out the conventional sense of what is education. And I agree with you, from my watching what's going on in our colleges and universities, some of them are producing really smart people, but there's a lot of miseducation, or maybe in their sense, proper education. But in the communist, sense of educating the public, not teaching them how to think critically, not teaching them how to be whole human beings that are productive, in society, but more cogs in the wheel and following the authoritarian leaders of a sort. That's the problem for me.
Yeah. So
Whether it's left or right. I mean, I'm critical of all systems of authority which limit the individual to think freely and act freely in their life, whether it's from the left or the right.
I agree with you. I think, today it's less a left and right dichotomy and more a common sense versus insanity dichotomy. So
Fair enough.
it's
Yeah.
I off camera I was telling you I watched Donald Trump's State of the Union speech. Well, part of these State of the Union speeches is they bring in ordinary Americans with some extraordinary stories, and they acknowledge them, they celebrate them. So Donald Trump talked about this 13-year-old black boy whose dream has always been to become a police officer, and he's suffering from brain cancer. He's had 13 surgeries, and when they first found out back in 2018, they told him he has 5 months to live. So he's already doing way better than they thought he'd have. And so Trump gave him an honorary Secret Service badge, right? The head of the Secret Service came, and then he hugged the head of the Secret Service. His dad was there. It was cool. Dude, the Dems sat on their hands. They couldn't applaud this. This boy dying of brain cancer because Donald Trump brought him out there. They couldn't applaud this. That's insane. That's insane. That's not left. That's not right. That's insane. If your humanity is so far gone that you can't see a human being acknowledged and recognized because your political opponent is doing it, there's something deeply flawed and deeply wrong with you. Your humanity's gone. You're not a human being anymore.
I agree, and that's a really great extreme example. But as you know, I spent 20 years in public policy, a lot of it in national security space, and it was amazing. I would see when Obama was in office, the Republicans would change their position because Obama said something, and vice versa. Trump's like something, so the Democrats have to change their position on stuff. That part stuff, I understand it because I got to watch it for 20 years, but it's nonsense. There's very few people I respect, and the few people that I do respect in terms of policy and politics are the ones who are consistent. It doesn't matter who's in office. If it's true, you should fight for it. It's true. No matter who's in office, or you're opposing it. That drives me fucking bananas.
Well, listen, I applauded when Obama, under his watch, brought down Osama bin Laden, man. I applauded. I thought that was great. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. Way to go. Right? I'm like, okay, you're taking more credit than you should. You should let the Navy SEALs take credit, not go under my direction. We did it. You should just say the SEALs got Osama bin Laden. Then everybody would give you credit because you didn't seem like a glory hound. But,
Actually, I'd love to speak to that too, because he actually should have said nothing about who did the operation.
Yeah.
That was a problem. He should not have named SEAL Team 6. Or was it him or Biden? One of the two. Biden's the vice president.
No, he did. Okay. He did. He totally named it. I heard other people say that too. Well, He could have said, hey, the United States military.
Yeah, that's what he should have said.
Just eliminated Osama bin Laden. He's the mastermind behind the 9/11 threats, blah, 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 blah. And this is a great day for America and for the families of the victims of the terrorist attacks that were masterminded by Osama bin Laden. I want you to know that we did this to give you closure. Boom. And that would have been amazing. That would have been amazing. But he didn't do that. He didn't do that.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. But back to the men's stuff, just in terms of a man mid-aged, late 30s, early 40s, early 50s, somewhere in there, even in the 60s, work with older guys in their early 60s. Who are literally starting their life fresh. And it can be really scary because you're so used to living your life the way you have for the last 10, 15, 20 years, however long you're married.
Yeah.
But it's also a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to discover who you really are, and both who you are in terms of your strengths, but also your weaknesses. These are areas whoa, I've never really got to explore. I need to explore. And courage is one of them. It's so easy to fall back on our laurels and our old habits. But when you're starting your life again fresh, it's an opportunity for courage and risk taking. and to try new things. And that's where when I work with these guys, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And I think I've spoken to you about one of the clients I'm working with recently who's in this position. And in my program, I work with them physiologically, psychologically, socially, and environmentally. The physiological stuff is diet, nutrition, fitness, movement, stress management, circadian biology. He got onto a great eating cycle, eating much healthier. He's exercising. He lost 30 pounds. He's dating again. I know his boss. He's showing up differently at work. He's showing up differently with his kids. He's a happier guy. He's making better decisions in his life. It's hard. It's like, it makes me feel really good to watch this guy like come out of his shell and just live the life he's always meant to live. And that's possible for any of us with, and you don't necessarily need psychological help or coaching help. Friends and family, some good accountability buddies, but like, it's really helpful to have a plan of action. Like, hey, this is what I work on mentally. This is what I work on emotionally, interpersonally, spiritually, physically. Put together a great plan, operationalize that plan, get support and accountability for that plan, and live the best life possible for yourself. It's awesome.
For a man to live the best life possible for himself, I think one of the things he has to have, and you and I both agree on this, is he needs to be what I call part of a brotherhood. Yes. He needs to be someone who participates in masculine-only spaces.
Yes.
Masculine-only spaces. So I had Robert Glover on both my podcasts.
Yeah, that's right, right.
And he said, hey, men today are craving masculine-only spaces, and most of them don't even know it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. And could you go a little bit deeper into why you are such a strong proponent of this?
Yeah, no, Dr. Glover is 100% right. And I'll give you two examples. So, I co-founded Team Foodishin. We do get together the hard physical challenges. And it was amazing because I'm here in Austin, Texas. We have this great lake called Lady Bird Lake. And every Saturday, my boys would get together and we do the lake. We do at least 10-mile ruck with weight vests and stuff like that. And I was 53 at the time, I'm 54 now, but all the guys were between 21 and 31. So they could all be my son. Yeah, they're all young pups. Great shape. And to a guy, they would all say, we have no place to come and both do bullshit and also have serious conversations. Because guys get together and they can have fun and talk about crap, which is awesome too. But then they're like, this is a place we can come together. And they were talking about their girlfriends or their wives or their kids because they didn't have space for that. And a couple of them even said, like, the only place we have to do anything like this was at the bar getting drunk. But that doesn't count because you're getting drunk and doing stupid shit. It's not a deep, meaningful conversation.
Not at all.
yeah, not at all. And you're probably there to pick up chicks. So like, okay, that's not really helpful. You're finding with other guys. So that was a great kind of test case to see and to hear what was so important and valuable to these guys and they lack in their lives. And then, as JC Glick and I, former Army Ranger, we've launched the Resilience Optimized Men's Group for that purpose. Like, men need a place to come to talk about their issues, get support, be held accountable. And as because you've talked to JC, you've talked to me, we take a very comprehensive approach, and it goes back to physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and interpersonal. Men need to be physically capable. Doesn't mean they need to be a David Goggins and run 100 miles before breakfast, but men need to be physically healthy and strong. That's in my perspective, I believe yours too, because I've seen what you do. You look like it. That's important. But they also need to be mentally resilient, emotionally resilient, spiritually resilient. And they need to show up differently in many cases in how they show up for their wives and their families. So having a place for men to go, it doesn't have to be our group. It doesn't have to even be our Foodishin rucking group. Somewhere for men to go to have these experiences and support one another is so important because we don't have that in our culture at all.
We don't. I mean, you're talking about being physically capable. I think being physically capable is very important. There's a lot of reasons why it's important. Maybe let's delve into some more detail around that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm friends with Erwan LaCour. He founded MoveNet, MoveNet.com. And it's a movement system based on how human beings evolved to move over time. Fascinating system. And I love talking to him about this because he's like, people go to the gym, and I know you go to the gym and I go to the gym, and we do we bench press and even weights on both sides, and you do certain reps. He's like, that's great, but can you carry a kid out of your house if the house is on fire? The kid's shaking around. He weighs 120 pounds or 90 pounds, whatever it is. He's not evenly situated on one side or the other. He's like moving. Can you do that? Could you carry your wife out of a burning building? Or if there's a car accident, could you break open the door and help someone get out of the car, or break the glass and help someone get out of the car? Wide variety of situations one might not necessarily always find themselves in, but might find themselves in. And it's less about gym strength, like I can do 300-pound bench press. That's awesome. But can you actually carry someone who needs your help a certain distance out of a fire or a threat or whatever it happens to be? And then also physically capable too is dealing with physical threats. Now, the smart thing is not to find yourself in those kind of situations. Okay, cool. The second smart thing is remove yourself from those situations because you just never know. But sometimes you might find yourself in an altercation. And are you able to protect yourself? Are you able to protect your wife? Are you able to protect your kids? And not that you have to be like Bruce Lee and full-fledged martial artist, but it can be helpful to have some basic skills so you can stop a threat and remove yourself from that situation as quickly as possible.
I think that's great. I think that's really true. And men need to understand that. So talk about needing mental strength and what mental strength and resilience means.
Yeah. So I would say the couple words that I love to use when I'm teaching this stuff is mental resilience is being able to be front side focused. We live in a very ADD society. Everyone's distracted. We have 30 seconds we can focus on anything, and then we're on to the next thing. Mental resilience is being able to be front side focused on whatever the goal is that you're working on that very moment and not being distracted by the stuff around you. That's so important. Not only that, another word I like to use is offensive mindset. And you don't necessarily do this literally, but you run towards the gunfire. And I'm not recommending anyone run towards the gunfire unless you're trained how to do that. But it's a metaphor. Michael will appreciate the metaphor. So you run towards the gunfire. It's like you want to have an offensive mindset. You see the challenge and you take on the challenge. You might be afraid. Hey, fear is normal. But that's not going to stop you. You're going to feel the fear and you're going to charge towards it anyways. Whatever the obstacle is. And what I find, it could be in a workspace, like with self-talk or interpersonal conflict you might have with someone in the workspace, but also in your relationships with your wife, for instance, or your girlfriend or your partner, whatever the degree of the relationship is. It's like I've seen, because I work with couples, that men, including myself, I'll take full responsibility for having done this in my previous marriage, put my head in the sand. I don't want to deal with the conflict. It's not rewarding. I'm not going to deal with this issue. I'm going to keep blowing it off. And then nothing gets resolved. Yeah. As opposed to taking a stance for the relationship, being offensive. And I don't mean offensive like you're going to offend your wife.
Yeah.
Aggressive, but like you're going to take a stance for this relationship, and you're going to need to do whatever you need to do because you're the protector of this relationship, to ensure that whatever the issue is resolved for both of your sake and for the relationship's sake or the family's sake. So focus and then offensive mindset in all areas of your life is one way I think about mental toughness or mental resilience.
That's really great.
Thanks. I can say you emotionally too, if you want.
Yeah, I want to go through emotional resilience and being interpersonally skilled and being financially self-sufficient. So let's do that. Let's go deep into being emotionally resilient.
Yeah, so there seems to be one or two options in our world today, and I think both of them are very limited and wrong. One is either you repress all your emotions, like I can't feel my emotions, cool, or you're like just gushing all your emotions and you're emotionally driven. Like I don't think either one of those are healthy. When I work with my clients, either individually or with my groups or as couples, with the men specifically, I teach them how to feel fully whatever emotions are happening in their system. Doesn't mean they have to act on them. They're not children. They're not 3 years old. They have to act on them. No, but feel your shit. Because if you don't, it's going to come out sideways as passive aggressive behavior, or it's going to show up as a chronic illness somewhere down the road. So you want to allow the feelings to come up. Hey, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm feeling guilty, I'm ashamed, whatever the things are, allow it to process through your system. That's really important. But that's like stage one or step one. Step two is, okay, I'm allowing it. Now what do I do with that? It's valuable information. It tells you something about yourself and yourself in relation to another human being. Maybe it gives you, like, there's anger. Maybe it's about boundaries that you're not setting clearly, or boundaries that are too tight for you. You're too rigid in a certain sense. Like, I need to loosen up. It depends, whatever it is. Or sadness. Wow, there's a loss that I've not really felt and dealt with. I really need to deal with that. So, like, it gives you information, and then you can use that information towards something useful for yourself. And then the third piece of that, or the third step, is like, how do I healthily express this? Sometimes it can be helpful to express anger, as long as it's not road rage and leads to violence. We don't want that. It can be helpful to express grief and sadness or guilt, whatever it is, because when you express it in healthy ways, let's just say to your partner, to your wife, and you're being honest with her how you really feel, then she can relate with you in the reality of the situation. If you withhold things and keep things in, she doesn't know who you are. She can't relate with you because she's not knowing who you are. Just you're wearing this mask. But if you can feel, manage, and express in healthy ways, then she can deal with you. And what I find in relationships, it increases the intimacy. Like, your wife actually wants to know what's going on with you. Doesn't mean you become a crybaby and sit in the corner and mope all day long. I mean, essentially that, like, being clinically depressed, but, like,
Sure.
but your wife would want to know what's going on for you, so she can offer support that you might need, that she might want to offer, you might want to get from her. And that gives her the opportunity to step forth and be a loving, caring partner too. And if you have anger and you share with your wife, I'm angry about this particular thing, that maybe you said or did, then you guys can deal with the reality of that situation. And maybe there's at least a really new conversation that needs to take place about needs not being met. And what I find with a lot of couples is like this mind reading thing. Oh, he should know what I'm thinking, or she should know what I'm thinking. That's bullshit. Now, some people, I believe it's psychic powers. So maybe some people have those things. For the most part, no, you don't. And you should be honest enough with your partner, emotionally and mentally, to share the reality of your own experience with them, because they're not mind readers. And once they know the reality of your situation, then they can act accordingly. If you think they should be mind readers, you're going to resent them because they're not doing what I think they should be doing. Well, they don't fucking know what you want, or what you need, or what you desire. That's, for me, part of the emotional question. It's like allowing, managing, healthily expressing. And part of that is also, I just named it, is kind of being aware of your own needs, wants, and desires, and being able to articulate them in healthy ways.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. So talk about what it means to be interpersonally skilled. Why is that a necessary skill for men?
Yeah, so I find this a broad generalization, but most men, when they're with their wives and their wife is being messy, and I've been given permission by my female friends to say messy, in the feminine energy, emotions all over the place, that makes a lot of men really uncomfortable. And they want to immediately go in and fix their partner, solve their problem. Cool, that's a nice impulse. But the question I ask the men is like, are you doing this because you feel uncomfortable? Or are you doing this because that's what she wants from you? And if they're being honest, a lot of them is like both. Like, oh, I don't, this makes me uncomfortable. I don't know how to sit with her emotionality. And I love her and I want to solve her problem. So what I work with couples, and I work especially with men within the couple dome, is like, you need to be able to understand what your wife needs at that moment, which could change 5 minutes from now, 5 hours from now, and 5 days from now. So it requires you to be constantly engaging her in conversations, because maybe she just wants to bitch and share and let it all out, and she just wants you to hold the space. Maybe she wants to share with you and have you ask questions and kind of do a deeper dive with her. Maybe she wants you to solve her problems or help her solve her problems. Cool, whatever she needs. So I teach the men how to be there, how their wife actually wants them to be there, not how they imagine the wife would want them to be there, to make themselves also more comfortable. That's mind reading. And what's really cool about this is it requires the husband both to learn how to sit in his own stuff and manage himself, because he might get triggered, activated when she's messy. So he has to learn how to like regulate himself. Cool. That doesn't mean you deny how you feel, but you're the man, so regulate yourself. Like, you don't have to get defended. You can just be relaxed and open and loving and caring and strong. But it also requires him to ask her questions, be curious about her, which is really cool, because I find in most relationships after a certain period of time that the questions stop, the curiosity ends, and you just expect the person to be, oh, that's just who they are, that's just how they are, that's just how they want to show up. Like, you turn them into a rock. But with the curiosity, you recognize that, no, they're a changing, evolving, growing, adapting human being. And it can increase the intimacy once you approach your partner with just curiosity. What's going on with you? What do you feel? What are your thoughts? What do you need? What can I do for you? And then your partner fucking loves that shit, because you're actually showing up for her as she would like you to show up for her.
Excellent. Excellent. You know, Michael, men need other men because they force them to think about these things. They force them to think about where they stand vis-a-vis the hierarchy of men in terms of their physical capabilities, their mental strength, their emotional resilience, their interpersonal skills, their financial self-sufficiency. It forces them to really think about it and level up their game. And as men, nothing makes us feel more alive than when we're engaged with a purpose, a mighty purpose that demands the best of us. And
Amen.
To me, the work that you do, the work that I do, seeks to demand the best of men.
And I would say that's a great segue to the spiritual resilience. Why? Why are you here? What is your purpose? And I 100% agree with you. In my experience with myself and all the clients I've worked with and studied, men need purpose. And what's fascinating about that too, and I'm speaking now to the women in the men's lives, it can be really helpful for the women to recognize that their man has a purpose, is living out his purpose, and to be grateful for that and to show appreciation for that. But I see so many times the man is struggling, like he's doing his thing. He's doing his things for his family. He's changing the world within his world. He's doing hard work. And over time, there's less appreciation from the wife for all the hard work he's putting in. And men need some ego boosting. And I find like when the women start doing that for their husbands, man, it doesn't require a lot. Literally just a few kind words of appreciation for the hard work that the husband's doing can go a long way. And the women need to recognize that the man, in most cases, it would seem, needs a purpose, is living his purpose. And for men, if they don't have one, I encourage them to find their why, their purpose. Because once you know your why, almost anything is possible.
100%, man. 100%. 100%. Brilliant stuff. So, Michael, if men are interested in finding more about your work, talk a bit about Team Futushin and talk about the resilience work you do with your partner for men. Yeah,
so I'll reverse order. So JC Glick and I, we run Resilience Optimized. You can Google Resilience Optimized. And we're launching cohort number 2 here next month. This is a 6-month cohort. We meet every week for an hour and 15 minutes. It's 2 things. It's a curriculum. So we have a very particular curriculum. Every month is a theme. Every week is a sub-theme. But it's also a group process. So men bring their stuff into the group and they talk about it. They get support. They get accountability. As you know, I spend a lot of time with the SEALs. So I talk about swim buddies. He's a ranger. He talks about ranger buddies. So we compromise. We talk about battle buddies. But you also get a battle buddy. So like you are in contact with your battle buddy during the week because stuff happens and you might need support. You might need some accountability. You might need a kick in the nuts. Like, hey, this is your bullshit. Like, stop bullshitting yourself. You have made this agreement. You need to move forward to what you agreed to. Or sometimes it's more of the grandmother's end. Like I talk about grandmother and grandfather's end. Grandfather's end is you get hit with a stick to wake you up. Sometimes you need that, especially men. Sometimes it's grandmother's end. Sometimes you just need someone to say, hey, put their arms on your shoulder and say, hey, man, everything's going to be okay. Because sometimes in life, things are really fucking hard. Yeah. And it's great to be stoked. It's great to be really strong. But sometimes you just need someone to, like I said, put your hand on your shoulder and say, everything's gonna be cool. Everything's gonna be okay. You don't always need to be hit by a 2x4 to be woken up. So that's Resilience Optimized with JC. I'm biased. It's a great group. I love JC. I love working with JC. It's so much fun. And then the Team Foodishin is a group we put together. We put together originally to do a 50-mile go ruck in Washington, D.C. Out of that, we realized that people like to do hard shit, like hard things. So we've organized, professionalized. We actually now have SealFit is a sponsor of ours. Kinetic is a sponsor of ours. It's a keto drink, ketone drink. So like we're professionalizing it. And what we recognize is, and this is for men and women, but we seem to mostly attract men, is that men and women some women like to do really hard things. They need a tribe. They want to be mentally tough, emotionally resilient. They want a tribe to support them. And we organize this in order to give people the opportunity to come together to do really hard stuff together. And not, like I said, not just to prove how physically capable we are, that's important, or emotionally resilient or mentally tough, but also to have a tribe, opportunity to network and have new friends and do really cool stuff together outside of just the hard physical challenges. So that's Team Foodishin.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. What you're doing is amazing. The fact that you want to serve men is inspiring to me. And I think you're one of society's Renaissance men, because you are extremely knowledgeable and extremely skilled in multiple areas. They call people like you polymaths. You're a real polymath. And when you come and you speak to me about the topics in which you have expertise, I always learn from you, because you're very widely read and you think about issues very, very deeply. And I think it's a beautiful thing. The world ought to know more about you. And, in this podcast, when I was listening to you speak, I thought, time to get Michael to write his book for men and get it out there. I think it would be a unique book that would reach a lot of men and frankly help you from a business point of view as well. So thank you again, Michael, for coming on the show, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us, brother.
Appreciate you. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. And that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.